Hello and welcome to the Big Life NYC podcast. I'm your host, Roderick Angle. On this podcast, I speak with longtime New Yorkers, gathering their tips and tricks for having a great life in one of the toughest cities in the world. Today, my guest is Maayan Zilberman.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for
Roderick.
coming.
Good to see you.
Maayan is an entrepreneur, an artist. She is the founder of Sweet Saba, which is a candy brand.
I'd say it's a candy brand, but it started out by me making art, which then people asked if they could have multiples of. And then I realized, there's actually an opportunity here to scale it and make it into a side business. Right. So it was initially a side business.
It's sugar art.
It's sugar art, yeah.
Right.
I started out making sculptures out of sugar, and then I made smaller versions of them in multiples for events, brand partnerships, etc.
Cool.
Yeah,
cool.
so I call it a brand because it's not my primary artwork. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. But is an extension of your art practice.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. And you've lived in New York City since 1997.
Yeah, even earlier actually. I first came here in 1995.
Right.
I left for a bit to go to school in San Francisco and came back, but I've lived here pretty much since I was 15.
Cool.
Yeah.
And we've been friends for a long time.
A really long time.
Couple decades, maybe?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I remember exactly when we met too.
Oh,
it's so funny.
Was it at pianos?
Possibly. I think it was at an event where there was a band playing and you were like sitting up on the bleachers and we were all like, who's that guy?
I was like, who's that girl?
Well, all of my friends were all saying the same thing.
Oh,
so,
really?
You know.
Oh, I'm flattered. So yeah, I've kind of followed your work through the decades, and it's always really interesting. It always touches on different areas. This is kind of in the mid-aughts, I guess. You started a really popular, notable lingerie line called the Lake and Stars, which I know the women loved the product, and I also loved the kind of ad campaigns you would do
we did
for
really
the marketing.
Wild campaigns. Those were the days where we didn't have social media, so the only chance to really like spread your wings and make a statement was in either your lookbook or your campaigns.
Right.
And lookbooks
were a big deal then.
Totally a big deal. And we used to print them and make bound books, and it was a really big production, and we were so proud of that work because you didn't do it every day the way you would in social media. You post something and then you have to do another thing the next week, maybe even sooner.
Right.
But what was so exciting is we would put so much into the productions because they were every 4 to 6 months.
Yeah.
And so they were really significant significant moments in our lives back then. Yeah. And I think the images really stuck with a lot of people because they were so sparse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were great.
Thank you.
Really well done. Yeah.
It was a fun time.
Yeah, definitely. So now you live in Brooklyn Heights, right?
Brooklyn Heights, yeah.
And you were telling me that you have an apartment there that you're currently renovating.
This beautiful set here at Studio 1873 is brought to you by the Everset. The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. We work with Brown Harris Stevens and many other top real estate firms, staging their homes to sell quickly and at the highest price possible. Our staging is affordable without sacrificing quality or design. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
Yeah, we just started. We just started the demo.
Well, I definitely want to talk to you about that.
Of course,
I want to talk to you about all the work and the artwork first, but I definitely will talk about the renovation at the end.
Sure.
Because I want to hear what you're going through.
Mm-hmm. I think everyone will relate on some level.
Or aspire to relate.
Yes.
So we knew each other in the East Village in kind of the mid-aughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
That era.
Like 2006, 2007, somewhere in there.
It was
maybe
that post-September 11th era in the East Village that was really creative, really social, really fun, And that was when you started the Lake and Stars.
That's when I started the line, with friends, as you know, and it was kind of a community effort in the way that I think a lot of like the newer generation is creating fashion brands now. Is you call on everyone that you know, and we all pitched in something and we all created something. So it was everyone's vision. It wasn't just like we would say, it wasn't a corporate kind of experience.
Sure,
We
it's
weren't like, this is what I want to do. My friend who photographed a lot of our campaigns that people remember, he and I went to art school together and we had a shared vision. And I didn't really even need to communicate that much to him. In those days and like during that time, the collective conscience was so strong, was like palpable.
Right.
We were all drawing on similar references. Like you said, post 9/11 was bringing out a lot of emotions in people.
Sure.
And it was also during a time where I think women or girls were starting to dress differently. That wasn't necessarily nostalgic, especially in lingerie. I was in that space. It wasn't like super sporty, like futuristic, and it wasn't nostalgic. It was about capturing that moment in time and really thinking about what people want in the present time, which was, it seems obvious now, right? But at that time, it wasn't really happening a lot.
Yeah.
You didn't see a lot of girls having the tools to express themselves right now.
Right.
It was like going retro or going future, which was like weirdly 90s also.
Well, that's why I think one thing is really interesting about your work or what you've always done is, I don't know if there's like a feminist aspect to it or just a feminine aspect to it.
It's feminine,
It's very feminine, and the areas that you touch on are these kind of uniquely feminine areas like lingerie.
Yeah, that's what I'm drawn to. I'm drawn to things that are, material that is inherently feminine, and then making a statement on that.
Well, so you would do the lingerie
and it goes across
line,
the board.
and then you'd have these. I remember going to some parties that you had that would, with like chocolate fountains over. It was like conceptual food parties. So you're like integrating with
before people really. I think we're more kind to that idea.
Yeah, so you
that was weird back then.
Take these like domestic areas and then expand on them and turn them into art experiences.
Yeah, but I also just kind of wanted to flip it upside down. I like taking things that were inherently feminine, like lingerie.
It became a comment.
And then my sugar work. Candy is inherently cute and pretty. It's not weird.
Right.
And so I like to start there and then tell a story from there with my point of view.
Right.
And so, whether it's my art or photography or, whatever it is, writing, it's always kind of taking that stand and making it a bit more like, if I may say, like badass a bit.
You can say badass.
Okay.
We can say badass.
I don't know swearing, right?
So then I guess we lost touch, over the years. So catch me up. How did you end up starting Sweet Saba? How did you end up in Brooklyn Heights? Those are probably two questions. Maybe it's one question.
That's okay. It's kind of around the same time, actually. Yeah. All of those big changes happened within a couple of years. Yeah. What happened was that, we had our brand, and it was very successful in that it was critically acclaimed, and we were at all the right stores, but it was at a time when, in that industry, there weren't that many places you could sell your work.
Right.
And if you didn't, they might call it selling out, but if you didn't, commercialize your work, and if you didn't scale in the way that they expected you to, you kind of couldn't make a living.
Right.
And
it's like go really big or go home.
Totally. Yeah. And things are different now, thankfully. I kind of stepped away from the industry, but at the time I had a chance to do something really commercial and corporate, which I did. I did some consulting, which was really interesting. It was just an education for me.
Right.
I got to travel to Asia, and I got to learn more about factories. And
still in lingerie.
Still in lingerie, yeah. And it was really interesting, but the hard truth was that you have to make tens of thousands of one style to make it worth, quote unquote, worth making.
Sure.
And that wasn't very appealing to me as a creative person. Right. It is for someone who's a true, through and through an entrepreneur. Right. But I come more from an art background that wasn't very exciting or like sexy, you know? Right. And so I kind of took a step back and I thought, okay, either I'm going to wait for a minute for the industry to shift and allow for a more creative outlook or a standpoint or, a more of an opportunity to make something interesting, or I'm going to do something completely different.
Right.
And so for the time being, I decided to do something completely different, which was to get my hands dirty again.
Right.
I wanted to start making things with my hands.
Sure.
And so I started making sculptures in my home. When I say sculpture, don't think like, Richard Serra. I'm talking about like, small pieces in my kitchen.
Right.
And I made them out of sugar because I didn't want to ruin my kitchen.
Okay.
I thought, okay, I'm not going to use silicones and stuff. I'm not going to like mess up my drains. Let me just use something that's ephemeral, where it's just an exercise to be creative and express myself as a diary, sort of.
Right.
And I started taking pictures of them, and I ended up doing a gallery show with that work, and it was, you know, written up in the Times, and
Cool.
and which was really cool. But I only mention that because sometimes it just takes that one moment
Right.
for people to notice and for them to be creative and have vision for what it could be.
Right.
I didn't see it as an entrepreneurial endeavor,
Right.
but other people did.
But you put it out there.
I put it out there, and it
yeah,
turned
see
into
where it
something
goes.
else.
Right.
Yeah,
Which
and
is
so
great.
I launched Sweet Saba right then when I wasn't really trying to switch gears.
Right.
I was just expressing myself and trying to get back in touch with the things that I really loved making. And what, you know, on the bright side, I'll just, you know, wrap up with the lingerie industry. What's really cool is that now it really has shifted, and there's so many amazing brands now that are interested in letting women express themselves and not reshape their bodies and not have padded bras with everything. It's really intensely creative.
Yeah.
I'm just not part of it anymore.
Well,
now I
think
can.
the
Now
news-
I actually
the
can just
news in
watch
the
it. You
lingerie
know.
industry over the last several years has basically like we want to get men out of that space.
Yeah, and great.
Yeah.
I mean, the women who are leading it are badasses,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And like, I'm super inspired by them. I kind of wish I was like doing some of it with them, but it's not for me. It's like, I'm actually enjoying it a lot more, just witnessing it and supporting it, you know?
Great.
It's a different chapter.
Cool.
Yeah.
Did you bring any examples of
I
your work?
did, and I realized that I should have unwrapped them before we started.
Well, let's
do you want
see
to
it.
pause, or do you want to? I brought you a big shoe because I felt like.
A big shoe. Let me see.
Yeah, and when I say shoe, you're gonna laugh because when you say that I like things that are feminine, you're gonna be like, yeah, obviously. Pardon. Oh my God, did it totally break on the way here? No. I'm not very precious with my work. This was a Louboutin that I did for a Louboutin
Wow,
project.
I love this.
Now, what I've been doing.
So what is this made out of?
This is sugar, but what I've been doing is I coat them in resin now for people to be able to put them on display.
Right.
So I did an installation over the holidays that was like a fashion shop, but every single thing was made out of sugar.
Right.
And people wanted to take them and, you know,
I'm
display
just
them.
going to leave that there.
Yeah, of course. So what I really love about this one is that it's not like a typical color. I wanted it to be slightly nauseating. So it's like slightly off-putting.
Right.
And I
It is
think
like a
when,
sickening pink.
yeah, like when
Yeah.
something is slightly off-putting, it makes you question, like, why is this interesting to me? Why is it appealing to me? It's kind of making me want to throw up a little bit.
Right.
But that's the kind of art that I love.
Cool.
Because you take like a gorgeous shape of a Louboutin stiletto heel, and you're like, ooh, obviously that's going to be sexy. But you're like, that kind of turns my stomach. Why is that?
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
And what other, I know you've done a lot of kind of corporate collaborations sort of things.
Yeah, mostly with luxury brands. I just did one with Van Cleef & Arpels where we did a big installation in their flagship of like butterflies and all sorts of, you know, like symbols from their new collection.
Right.
I've also done things with like Gucci and Versace. We did big rosaries with Medusas for the Met Gala. Like a lot of things like that where it is corporate, sure, in that, you know, we have to go through a lot of emails to get to the last to the last stage.
Right.
But I really love it because every client that I work with is completely different.
Right.
I get to work with the creatives and they tell me what they're working on. Sometimes I go in at the beginning of a collection and then we do something to launch the collection. So by the time we re-meet, you know, we both come to the event with something kind of fresh.
Right.
And, you know, I've worked with everything from fashion and jewelry brands to like the NBA. I did something with the Knicks. So I made replicas of all of the players' shoes in different sizes and they're ginormous.
Right.
And I do things with, I don't know, liquor brands, travel agencies. I mean, it's really just a medium, and then we go from there.
Right. Cool.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Cool. Such a great idea.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So
How did I end up in Brooklyn Heights? I was going to
Exactly.
say, yeah.
So you're married now, right?
I am, yeah.
And you have a child.
Yeah,
You have
I
a
do.
5-year-old
I
daughter.
have a 5-year-old daughter
Right.
named Freddie.
Freddie?
Yeah, and so, you know, I'll kind of rewind a little bit. When I stopped working in lingerie and started working with the sugar, it was, you know, I was stepping away from, you know, being obsessed with production and press and like having to wake up every morning and have your own business. And I was stepping away from that, but also from having an excuse not to have a real life. And I made space not only to do my art, but to be open to romance and
Right.
to like having place in my heart to be really with somebody.
Right.
And that's when I met my husband.
Cool.
And we had met many years prior, but I wouldn't have even really considered it. Like he wasn't on my mind, and he
Right.
called me, like cold called me out of nowhere
Wow.
and said, "I've always liked you, and I want to take you out on a date."
Wow. That's ballsy.
It is. He didn't even text me. No
Right.
texts.
Right.
I couldn't even see if he was witty or not before.
Right.
So, yeah, and I said, I was totally, jaded at the time. I didn't
course.
care. I was like, whatever, who is this guy,
Right.
And he said, well, we met at a party a long time ago. And I was like, ugh, what do you want? What are you doing later? Maybe we'll hang out later.
Right.
I didn't care. I
Right.
was too cool for school, right? And he
Sure.
says, well, I'm going to a dinner party. And I said, well, I'm going to a dinner party too. And of course, we were going to the same dinner.
Right.
So I said, well, I guess I'll see you in a few hours then.
Right.
So I walked in the door and I was like, oh, we're together.
Right.
There isn't
was-
really any.
It was that quick.
It was that quick.
Right.
I knew who he was, so it wasn't as if, I needed to learn about him from nowhere. We had a lot of mutual friends, and I just looked at him and I thought, oh, yeah, you were right.
Right.
You're my boyfriend.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah, and so it was really at that same time, and soon after we moved in together into his childhood home.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
so that's how you ended up in Brooklyn Heights.
That's how we ended up in
so
Brooklyn Heights.
he's like born and raised in Brooklyn Heights.
Yeah, in the
Oh,
place
I
that we're
see.
renovating.
Okay.
He moved away, he went to boarding school and then ended up living,
Well,
on
that
Irving
was lucky.
Place.
That's a good move.
It is. It's funny though. It's like when you tell it like that, it sounds like, ooh, you're like princess,
Right,
you're like
right.
moved into the royal castle.
Right.
But it's
Well, no, but just, you didn't
sounds
have to
like
go
that.
through the process of.
sure.
purchasing a home
I
in
didn't
New
have
York
to go
City.
through
Yeah,
that. Thankfully, his parents did that when he
Yeah.
was a little kid.
Right.
Actually, sorry, before he was born, I think.
Yeah.
And it was a rental building that turned co-op.
Okay.
And so they really lucked out and
Wow,
were
that's
able to
great.
buy into this, the
Right.
situation
That's
that
great.
afforded them a beautiful home in a beautiful neighborhood.
Right.
But with that comes an apartment that hadn't been updated since before he was born.
Right. Right.
So you have a lot of old electrical work, an oven that needs to be lit with a match. And if you see me, I have a long ponytail, and it's a fire hazard when you sneak into the oven with a match.
Right.
So
That's why it's slicked back.
was not a cute situation
Right.
for little old me.
Right. Right. So how long did you live there before you started the renovation project?
Yeah, we lived there. Well, he had lived there for a number of years before I moved in.
Right.
He was living there with the thought that his mom was going to move back. She was just away in Boston working, and he thought, oh, I'll live here because you can't rent it out.
Right.
He said, I'll live here until you come back. And then she says, actually, I'm not coming back. You have the apartment.
Right.
So I said, well, if you have the apartment and you're going to stay here and it's a beautiful location, we should probably update it so
Right.
that it's ready for when we have a baby,
Right.
which we were planning.
Right.
That was not how it went down.
Right.
Because first we came across all of the permits that you need to get in a co-op
Sure.
building, in a landmark co-op building.
Oh, it's landmark.
It's landmarked, so there are a lot of hoops to jump through. And then COVID hit,
Right.
and we live in a building that has a board full of people who have lived there their whole lives and are very cautious and didn't want anybody coming into the building to do anything
Right.
during COVID. So while some people we were friends with built entire homes from the ground up during COVID,
Right.
we did the opposite.
You did
We
nothing.
we did nothing.
Right. But you were in
Yeah.
this apartment during COVID.
We were in the apartment during COVID. We actually went to
lighting the stove.
lighting the stove.
Right.
We actually spent some time in Palm Springs during that time.
Okay.
During the winter time, our daughter was at an age where she needed to run around, and
Sure.
it's that particular age that I think anyone who has a little one knows. It's a certain age where they have to run around or they will freak.
Right.
And we were in a small apartment where you couldn't go anywhere. All the playgrounds were closed.
Sure.
There was just nowhere to go. So we said we have to go somewhere where she can be warm and run around. So we did that for a few months. It was fantastic.
Right.
Thought we'd come back to, being able to press go, and it wasn't go for another long time.
Right.
But long story short, they lifted the ban in our building, and we were able to start again. And in some ways, I think that a lot of people want to kind of rush into a renovation, or like they want to get it all done quickly. And sure, this sounds like super privileged because we had the privilege of living this way for a while until we were able to do it. But I really liked having this time to sit with the designs and really mull it over and think about whether or not I really loved all of the choices we were making,
Right.
because we changed our mind about most of them.
Right. So are you
You know?
doing like a top-down renovation? Are you gutting it?
Yeah, we gutted it.
Yeah. Down to the studs.
Down to the studs. It wasn't of course, it wasn't the plan, right?
Right.
But once we started cutting into the walls, we saw there was no insulation on any of the outer walls,
Right.
and the electrical work was, there are no words.
Right.
So, and we had originally planned on doing like a 2-phase renovation. Like, you know what, let's do everything we absolutely have to do now, and then we'll do the floors next time.
Right.
And going through moving out, because we had to move out, we rented a place around the corner.
Okay.
Going through all of
How
that.
long have you been moved out now?
I'd say about 4 months.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're now, finishing the demo, and we've framed all the walls and done the plumbing.
So are you more than halfway through the renovation?
I wouldn't say that, no.
No. So you're going to be out for another 4 months.
Oh, at least,
At
yeah.
least.
Yeah, I'd
So
say
you're probably going to be out of your house
Like a year.
for about a year.
Yeah.
Right.
And we made peace with that. We've waited this long to do it, and we're really excited about it and want it
Right.
done right. And we can see that it's being done right.
Is the rental also in Brooklyn Heights?
Yeah, the rental is a 2-minute walk.
Okay, so you're in the same neighborhood.
We're in the same neighborhood. I mean,
Your
it's a
daughter's going
tiny
to the
little
same
apartment.
same
Yeah,
school,
our
right.
daughter's at the same school.
Right.
It's a tiny little apartment that we found, just totally by chance through a friend in the neighborhood.
Right.
I'm sure you know that it's very hard to find real estate in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
So it's very
I
difficult.
mean, I'm not that familiar with Brooklyn Heights, to tell you the
okay,
truth, but
Great.
yeah, I've heard it's really
Yeah, we
beautiful.
love it.
Great views, right?
Great views.
Great
just
parks.
Great air, great trees,
Right.
great parks. We're right near Brooklyn Bridge Park and the promenade.
Right.
And it just has a really friendly vibe. And like when we walk around, everyone says hi to my daughter.
Right.
They all know her name.
That's great.
It's really sweet, and she feels like she's part of a community, which
Right.
I
It's a
love.
real neighborhood.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not unique to New York. There's so many neighborhoods like this, but where we are, really.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
Yeah.
So what advice, I know you're not all the way through the process,
Sure.
but what advice do you have to somebody else renovating their apartment, or what would you do differently, or what have you learned?
Yeah. What would I don't think I've been through enough to have learned any big lessons other than take your time with the big decisions.
Right.
I would say don't get too excited about changing where walls are, or changing where the water or the gas is.
Because that's really hard and really expensive.
It's really hard and really expensive, and like at the end of the day, does it really matter so much to you that it's moving?
Right.
I try to work with what you've got.
Right.
And another thing that I would say, just that I'm learning through this process, is don't feel like you have to make really bold statements with the building materials. Like you don't need to use a really bright countertop or really, some crazy stone for your shower.
Right.
That you can decorate and redecorate over and over again. But the things
Right.
that are really expensive and really hard to change, I would go with like more classic and traditional materials.
I totally agree with that, and I see both sides of that. I see people that do that successfully, and I see mistakes being made.
Of course. What mistakes do you see?
Well, just using a really bright color palette,
Yeah.
just doing something that you're in love with that's so unique to your tastes, and then you go to try to sell it, and
Right.
I deal with buyers all the time that are looking at a seller's dream home, and they're talking about how they're gonna gut it.
Oh God, that's a nightmare.
Yeah.
That is a nightmare.
So yeah, you do want to
totally.
stick
Well, I think
with
that
more
we're all,
classic decisions.
no one's really immune to this. We all look through Pinterest and
Right.
everything online and all social media. We see all of these amazing editorials, myself included, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is a dream. We got to do this.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I think, oh my God.
Do I want to live with that?
Yeah,
for the next
exactly.
15
Like we can change a
years?
wallpaper.
Sure. Yeah.
We can change a faucet.
Yeah.
But we can't change that built-in furniture,
Right,
right?
right.
Not easily, right? So I'd say I'm too green to really know exactly what advice to give at the moment. But I'd say take your time
Yeah.
if you can afford to.
Right. Cool. And then we're getting towards the end of our time.
Mm-hmm.
So what's this show? I want it to always be about advice, actionable advice to New Yorkers. What advice do you have for a young person moving to the city to pursue a creative life?
I got really inspired recently. I went to a a drag show that was full of students, like art students.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time that I felt the energy that I felt when I first moved to New York. And not because it was drag, because like obviously that's just fun anyway, but it was like young kids who moved here to find their people.
Right.
And you can see that they'd found them.
Right.
And I got really emotional.
Yeah, that's
you know,
exciting.
I was with my husband and I was like, this is how it was when I moved here. I haven't seen this since then.
Yeah.
And it's probably like around the time when you were here too, you know, like we'd go out.
Well, because we all separated, went our ways,
Yeah.
and started our families. But yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And, you know, you don't have a lot of money. You come and you just make stuff out of garbage, basically. And it may be shitty. Sorry. It may be crappy.
Right.
You know, it doesn't have to be good. Like, you just have to make stuff.
Right.
And you have to make music and you have to do a play that may be bad.
Right.
But all of those things are going to be a vehicle to find the people that you feel good with and who bring out the best in you.
Yeah.
And so it may seem kind of cliche, but like, rather than just trying to find your people, because that's really hard to do in a big city, especially if you're not an extrovert.
Right.
You know, a lot of people come here, they're kind of shy. Maybe they didn't fit in where they came from.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, you were made fun of in your hometown and you came to New York being like, I'm going to find who it is. It's really hard to just go out there and find them. But if you do the things that you love to do, then you automatically find yourself surrounded by people who like
It
to do that
draws
too.
people to you.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
that's like the advice that I give students, or that I give to anybody who's super young. It's like that drag show. You may put on a performance that's not going to get on Drag Race, but you did something and it invited people to celebrate that thing with you.
Yeah.
So that's really like what I would say, and it's what I say to my daughter too. I'm like, the things that you love to do, let's find other kids who like to do those things,
Right.
because you're going to make lifelong friends with
Right.
them.
Right.
It doesn't have to be good.
Right.
Not everyone is a genius.
You just have to do it.
Yeah.
You have to do it and put it
Yeah.
out there. Yeah. That's great advice. Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming. It's been
Thanks.
great to
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been great to reconnect with you after, so
course.
many years.
I know.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. If you're loving the show, make sure to subscribe and follow the show. And there's other podcasts on the More Network. Follow the More Network for more great podcasts from Brown Harris Stevens.